It's March 29th, 2025, and you're watching Cover News. In a United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit on March 24th, a appeals case was being heard over a temporary restraining order that a lower court had put in place. This restraining order would bar planes deporting Venezuelan migrants claimed to be part of a Venezuelan gang called Tren de Agua from the United States to El Salvador. So they would deport them from the United States to El Salvador on the basis of them being part of this gang. Now, what was being heard is whether this temporary restraining order should be kept in place or it should be thrown out. The Trump lawyers say that the law should be thrown out, the restraining order should be thrown out because the federal government has no place to say what Trump can or can't do with the Alien Enemies Act to the AEA of 1798. And the ACLU lawyers say that these people didn't get due process and they need to at least have a court case before you deport them. Uh, you're claiming that they're part of this gang, and you need to prove that before we kick them out. Not 1 minute into oral arguments, Judge Patricia Millett would interrupt Trump's lawyers and just start a fiery back and forth. Let's listen to that first.
It's second guessing of the president's determinations that the statutory preconditions of the AEA were satisfied for a foreign terrorist organization, Tren de Aragua, or TDA. Even though both the Supreme Court and this court have explicitly held that such challenges are not within the power of the federal courts to hear. The district court's order is therefore appealable, much as a TRO directing the president to redeploy a carrier group from the South China Sea to the.
So basically here, the Trump's lawyer is arguing that the United States court, the Supreme Court has already ruled that you can't review a president's wartime powers. This isn't really the place for a federal court to hear this. Maybe a military court, but definitely not a federal court can review this kind of stuff. And the judge in this case, Patricia, is going to interrupt him here.
Persian Gulf, or to halt.
Hang on. I mean, one of the claims pressed here, which the Supreme Court has expressly said, and we have said, courts can entertain. So put aside interpretive questions about whether there's an incursion or invasion, is whether these individuals qualify under the terms of the proclamation, whether they're members of Tren de Aragua. I assume, as below, the government does not dispute that that is something courts can adjudicate, correct?
So basically, she claps back with, well, that's one of the things here. You know, the temporary restraining order originally did say that the plane should turn around and return these people to the United States, but that's not really what the restraining order is getting at. The restraining order is getting at that these people didn't get their due process, and we didn't determine whether they are or aren't part of this gang, and you didn't have the right to deport them when you did. And that's really what the restraining order is trying to stop here, is trying to make sure that these people do get their due process before they're deported to El Salvador.
Your Honor, it's certainly something that courts have adjudicated in individual habeas claims.
That's a separate thing, but courts can do that. And so asserting a power to do that is not ordering ships to relocate in foreign waters, right? That is straight up judicial process that's allowed by the Supreme Court and circuit precedent. I understand you have your argument then about habeas, right? But that's a procedural point. Your points about him overstepping seem to be forgetting that there is this claim, and in fact, this morning, he's limited the TROs to the likelihood of success to that prong. And so we don't need to go any further.
So, yeah, here Judge Millett pretty much says that the restraining order was narrowed down to this smaller subsect of we just want to determine whether or not these people are part of this gang, and what proof do you have that they are part of this gang, so that we can know that you're using this law constitutionally and you're not just deporting any random person like we have seen the Trump administration do with this law. So the lawyer in this case is going to argue in such bad faith, and this is why I'm really covering this court case here, is the way that the Trump lawyer tries to argue here is just wholly hilarious, and you can just hear in Judge Millett's voice just how upset she is getting. For a judge to interrupt you so early on into your opening arguments, not 1 minute into your opening arguments, is one thing, and it just devolves from here. Here in our next clip, you could hear, or you're going to see the Trump lawyer pretty much say that it's unprecedented for a court to try and stop a president's wartime powers like this, and the response that the judge gives is pretty funny.
It may be acting on a preliminary injunction soon, but I think the intrusion upon the war powers and foreign policy powers of the president is utterly unprecedented. And in a way,
Well, this is an unprecedented action as well. So of course, there's no precedent for it because no president has ever used this statute this way, which isn't to say one way or the other what it can be done, but simply to say we are in unprecedented territory. But
So yeah, basically saying, hey, we're in unprecedented territory. Nobody's ever used the Alien Enemies Act in this way. As a little bit of background, Trump signed this executive order, I believe, on Saturday in the dead of night. So all the courts are closed, people are sleeping, and he thinks that he's just going to sign this executive order, make these planes leave exactly that night. We saw videos of these planes leaving or landing in El Salvador in the middle of the night, while everyone's asleep here in the United States, so that a court can't hear this case and can't put a restraining order in place quick enough to stop this initial plane from leaving the United States. In this next back and forth between Judge Millett and the Trump lawyer, we're going to hear them argue in such bad faith, and just the frustration between the judge and the lawyer here starts boiling up, where if you were arguing with anyone and they were being this bad faith, you would definitely not have the patience that this judge has.
like AEA only detentions, certainly, but the challenge has been brought to that.
I'd be curious to know if you can find out and if it wouldn't reveal,
I should mention that this case was being heard in front of a panel of 3 judges. So it's not just Judge Millett on the board. There is a Henderson and a Walker also overhearing this case, and it's a 3-panel ruling.
something too sensitive to reveal. If there is anyone being detained solely on the basis of the alien.
This is Judge Justice.
Your Honor, we're certainly happy to track that down and provide that information to the court.
Thanks.
And
it seems like the relevant thing is were people being removed solely, not detained, but
So she's asking here were people being removed from the United States solely on the fact that they were part of this gang and solely under the Alien Enemies Act, basically trying to hint at, is the only reason that these people were kicked out and the only mechanism that they were kicked out by this Alien Enemies Act. I want to know, did anybody here get due process?
moved solely based on the proclamation. It seemed like, and again, you can clarify for me, I'm just looking at a cold record here, that proclamation was signed and people were getting put on planes immediately without even notice as to the basis. let alone an opportunity to file suit. And so were those removals, I think there was one airplane that you said that was, people were removed on other grounds. But there were two where the government hasn't argued that. Am I recalling the record correctly?
Your Honor, I believe so. I mean,
Two planes worth of people removed under the AEA, not under withholding of removal process, or remove of the ordinary INA removal.
the Title VIII process. Yes, Your Honor. But I think the fact is that 5 individual plaintiffs were able to march into court, file habeas, actually get relief, admittedly on non-habeas grounds. And the fact that opportunity.
Without the government.
So this is a little bit bad faith here. The lawyers don't argue here that there were 5 people who did file with a court trying to contest whether or not they were part of this Venezuelan gang. And these 5 people show that people are getting due process. But the tricky part about this is these 5 people, they filed after the restraining order was put in place. The people that were put on the first 2 planes that she's going to talk about, she says that there were 3 planes that did go out. 2 of them were filled with people that were being tried under this Alien Enemies Act, the AEA, and one of them under Title VIII, which is just the normal deportation processes, that 2 of these planes were filled with these people, and they were deported before the restraining order was able to be put in place. And the 5 people that you're talking about were able to only do this because there was a restraining order put in place. If there wasn't a restraining order, these people might get deported faster than a lawyer can file for a court case.
I mean, that was a super fast order that was done, as you know. I mean, the government was called and notified, and then a hearing that afternoon. But that's one of the reasons there's all these separate disputes in district court about compliance, because planes were already loading and taken off. And those folks did not have notice or an opportunity to challenge their status
to bring up these 5 people
at all.
And
that's
just,
why there's had to be a class
frustrating.
certification to slow things down until we have an opportunity for due process.
Your Honor, I think this court's decision in IM versus CBP is instructive on this.
Am I wrong about anything I just said factually?
You can just hear it.
Your Honor, I think it's incorrect that they couldn't have gone into court as the 5 individual plaintiffs.
No, but
also
the point here was that there were plane loads of people. I mean, it's a class action. There were plane loads of people. There were no procedures in place to notify people. Nazis got better treatment under the Alien Enemy Act than has happened.
And I love this part right here where she just goes that Nazis during World War II got better treatment because historically during World War II, when we were deporting German citizens, there was a commission put in place to determine whether or not a German citizen was a German citizen and whether or not they were valid for deportation back in World War II. And back then we gave people due process and hearings, and we made sure that they were who the government said that they were before we deported them. So Nazis got better treatment than these Venezuelan so-called gang members, whether they are or aren't, is being contested. So Nazis got better treatment than the people we're deporting right now.
Happened here where the proclamation required the promulgation of regulations, and they had hearing boards before people were removed. And yet here there's nothing in there about hearing boards, there's no regulations, and nothing was adopted by the agency officials that were administering this. People weren't given notice, they weren't told where they were going, and they were given, those people on those planes on that Saturday had no opportunity to file habeas or any type of action to challenge the removal under the AEA. And like you've agreed that 2 of those airplanes, people were removed under the AEA. What's factually wrong about what I said?
Well, Your Honor, we certainly dispute the Nazi analogy, but more.
I love that. We certainly dispute the Nazi analogy.
Importantly, the fact is that individual plaintiffs were able to file habeas in time in order to secure relief.
Wait,
And
what
with this court,
individual plaintiffs were?
the 5 individual plaintiffs that
That's
got
not my
with the five
question. My
again.
question is there were a lot more people. They wanted to bring a class action. They had to have some named plaintiffs. So 5 people filing habeas doesn't help everybody else on 2 airplane loads. Correct? And my question to you is, and you said those 5 didn't get put on the airplanes. So as to the 2 airplanes that I think you just agreed involved removals solely on AEA grounds, on Saturday, the very short time of the proclamation's publication, had no opportunity to have filed
So
for
she asked
habeas or
them.
even notice as
She
to the
wants to
grounds on which they
know,
were being removed.
Did
Am
people
I
get
wrong about
due
that?
process?
I think so, Your Honor. The fact that 5 individual
And he brings
plaintiffs
up the
did
5
file
again.
habeas and did get
Bring up the 5
relief
again. Do
indicates
it.
that they
I
could.
don't think you're answering my question. My question is not as to the 5 plaintiffs. How much time, I want you to think of 5 other people
I
on the
like-
first airplane.
I like how she treats this person like a child, I feel like, because this person is not, she must realize that this person is arguing in bad faith. This person doesn't want to answer the question because he doesn't have an answer to the question, because what Trump did here was wholly wrong. And she has to say, I want you to imagine, right? Like, because I understand that you right now can't even bring yourself to think that there are 5 other people, but I want you to imagine 5 other people on the other plane, on the planes that did go out to El Salvador. I want you to imagine there, because this person is not answering the question in good faith.
How much time when were they given notice that they were being removed under the AEA on the grounds that they were members of Tren de Aragua? And how much time were they given between that notice and being put on the airplane that Saturday, right after the proclamation was signed, to file a suit?
Your Honor, those facts are not in the record, and I don't know all of them offhand, but I think.
Okay, so
It's a-
go ahead, you think?
But I think the fact that 5 individuals were
Yeah,
able to do
reduce
so
the five.
indicates
They
that
got
others
lucky.
could have. Well,
They filed suit before the proclamation was even published. I've asked you after the proclamation was published. And I assume these habeas actions
The
that you're
proclamation
talking
here
about,
was a
and correct me
TRO,
if
I
I'm
believe.
wrong, that are now being filed in Texas, have been filed since there's been a stay.
But Your Honor, I'm talking
Is that
about
right?
the 5 individual plaintiffs in this case.
That's not my question.
I
The
understand.
question here is, if someone thinks there was a meaningful opportunity, notice and opportunity to file for habeas for the people on those 2 airplanes, which are not these 5 named plaintiffs,
She's just getting more and more frustrated.
because they filed
I would be.
before the proclamation was even published. If there was no opportunity for those folks to file habeas, then that's the issue for the TRO, to freeze things in place so that compliance with due process can occur.
Well, Your Honor, as to due process
You
claim.
haven't disagreed with any of my facts about there wasn't time for the people on those 2 airplanes. You haven't,
Your Honor,
I'll try it one at a time. Were they given notice before being put on the airplane that they were being removed because they were members of Tren de Aragua pursuant to the president's proclamation under the AEA?
Your Honor, I don't think that is in the record.
Okay. You can't speak for the government with knowledge about
And I
that.
love this. It's gonna go to, well, you know, I don't know about that. I don't know if that's in the record. I'm not authorized to talk about that. And just go on and on, trying not to answer this question. Did these people get due process?
Your Honor, my understanding on public news reports is that they had some sort of notice. I don't know the specific contours of that. But again,
Okay.
our position
So
is
we
the
don't know
fact.
that- So there's no record that they were given notice. And then how much time was there between the president's signing of the proclamation and those 2 planes taking off?
Your Honor, that's not in the record. I don't know that
But
specific.
you had the times of those planes
Oh, wait,
down pretty clearly, and we know what time the president's proclamation was published.
Your Honor, the record has what times that they had departed before the 7:25
But
p.m.
that must be findable, what time the planes took off.
Your Honor, it's the government is currently engaged in evaluating any of that can be disclosed.
What time, you can tell what time the planes landed, but you can't tell what time they took off?
There's also a reason why these TROs are put in place, and something that the lower court is trying to figure out whether or not the Trump administration did or didn't ignore a court order to stop planes after they knew that they shouldn't send these planes out, right? Like, the judge says, you need to not send these people to El Salvador, and he says that, and we're trying to figure out whether or not, after he said that, did these planes go out? Did the planes still continue to do the thing that they were told not to do by the court? Did they ignore the court? And the Trump lawyer is going to say, well, we're still trying to determine whether or not we can say when those planes went out, because we don't want to say something that's going to get us in trouble.
We have told what time that what their status as of when the 7:25 p.m. minute order issued, and I'm not authorized to discuss any more operational details
Okay,
of that.
is the government aware of how long it takes to fly from wherever this airport is in Texas to El Salvador generally?
Your Honor, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Questioning is,
That can be found out pretty easily.
or this line of answer.
Time. I mean, it just feels like there was no time. And the habeas cases you're talking about now were only able to be filed because the district court froze things.
Well, Your Honor,
Right?
this case itself was originally filed as a
Are
habeas
there
action.
other habeas cases that you mentioned filed in Texas? When were they filed?
Your Honor, I believe at least one of them was filed, but before the plaintiffs indicated that they thought a plane had taken off. That I can track down, but that's my recollection.
The other ones have all been because there's a stay in place.
What's that? You know, I don't know the precise status of every single one of those individual habeas actions. That's a very
I don't know how they
fast.
could have been filed before the president's proclamation
And
was
that's
made
one of
public.
hundreds.
And before someone was told that they were being subject to it, right?
Your Honor, again, I just
Otherwise,
disagree.
it wouldn't be a right claim.
Your Honor, we're here because 5 individual plaintiffs filed a complaint that
brings up the
clearly
file again.
included habeas claims, as Judge Walker indicated. And here we are hearing that very claim. And here's what this court said. Excuse me.
Brother here is falling apart. So, we get to see the Trump lawyer pretty much say 5 people did get to file habeas. They did get a right to their trial, but these 5 people, maybe 4, were after the restraining order was put in place. He can't tell you when the plane left, at what times at what times did they get those orders, and at what time did those planes leave. Can't tell us that. And just falling apart and using the most bad faith debate tactics ever to try and weasel his way around this appeals. Next here we have the lawyer trying to argue that the court is trying to determine whether or not the Alien Enemies Act is constitutional or not. And Judge Millet is going to say, that's not what we're trying to determine. We're not trying to determine whether or not the law is constitutional. We've already determined that. We know that the law is constitutional. We've used this law a couple of times in history. I mean, probably not for good reasons, but the law is there and it is constitutional. What we're trying to determine is whether the implementation, how the law is being used, is lawful. And let's listen in on that.
Which obviously includes
They're saying the whole statute's under constitution. No one's saying the Alien Enemies Act is, well, maybe they'll tell me they're saying that, but the entire Alien Enemies Act is unconstitutional. That has been decided. The question is whether a particular proclamation and its implementation is constitutional. This happens all the time. The statutes are constitutional, but how they're implemented in a particular case is not. That's all we're talking about. And in Ludicky and in Clark was a case like this one. It wasn't a habeas, sorry. I used a shorter name for the case in this court, Clark. It was 159 people and an organization who represented their interests who filed suit. And we recognize there that you could have a challenge to whether you qualify under the proclamation, right?
Your Honor, I don't
And
think.
that's the issue here, is whether there's a process.
I agree that that's how the district court saw it, but there were due process arguments raised in those cases as well. And this court said that if there was the slightest question in the minds of the authors of the Constitution or contemporaries concerning the constitutionality of the Alien Enemies Act, it would have appeared.
And that's basically here saying the constitutionality of the act, the way that the act is being implemented, and also the judge is going to bring up that people in the past did get trials. They did get due process.
None did.
Yeah, that's
did.
the constitutionality of the act. You just finished the sentence for me.
Right.
My question is, and I think what district court here hasn't called into question the constitutionality of the Alien Enemies Act. It's been upheld, as you said, as a part of the war power. But so that's not the question here. The question is whether the implementation of this proclamation without any process to determine whether people qualify under it. I mean, if the government says we don't have to give process for that, then y'all could have put me up on Saturday and thrown me on a plane.
And I love that. You could have put me on that plane. And that is the truth. That the way that this law is being implemented right now, you, me, your neighbor, anybody you know could just be grabbed off the street, which we've seen happening now. We just saw a report of a lady being grabbed off the street by some agents. They just flash their badge and grab her and put her in a van, and we don't know where that person is, can just be put on a plane and deported. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't go to a judge. You can't go to a court. No amount of lawyers are going to save you from that action.
Thinking I'm a member of Nicaragua and giving me no chance to protest it and say,
exactly.
Somehow it's a violation of presidential war powers for me to say, excuse me, no, I'm not. I'd like a hearing.
Nope, you don't
You
get
wouldn't
one.
say that.
This isn't America.
Your Honor, obviously nothing of the sort is presented by the record here. I think what.
No, we don't have any record.
No record.
On whether
exactly.
these individuals are members of Nicaragua or victims of Nicaragua.
Your Honor, as you've characterized it, what that sounds like to me is an argument that the AEA is unconstitutional because it doesn't provide for pre-deprivation.
It's not an argument about the statute. I'm going to say this, and I don't know how to say it any more clearly. My questions are about the implementation of a particular proclamation under the statute. That is not an argument. And quite frankly, the statute provides that there will be regulations issued.
Exactly.
And regulations to determine someone's status have happened every other time the statute's been used. So this isn't about the statute being unconstitutional. It's whether implementation of it under this proclamation is unconstitutional. And not even, is it unconstitutional? Is there a likelihood of showing that there's a constitutional problem here because of the lack of due process? We're not even deciding the merits. So please do not attribute to me that I'm saying the statute's unconstitutional. You and I agree that that has been answered. But implementation of a proclamation is a completely different question. Can we agree on that?
Your Honor.
You won't agree, I mean, maybe that it's constitutional problem, but you agree that it's a separate question whether the implementation of something under a lawful statute is constitutional.
Your Honor, it's certainly that.
And there we have just the kind of problem that we have with this law. Basically, anybody could just be grabbed up. They could be put on a plane and sent to El Salvador. We don't know how long these people are going to be imprisoned. These are work camps, almost concentration camp-esque places where you are going to serve a life sentence here. We don't know how long the sentence is going to be, but it's probably going to be a life sentence. and nobody's going to see, nobody's going to be able to contact you. You're not going to have the same kind of legal rights that you have here in the United States once you're deported to this El Salvadorian prison, right? There's also a huge problem of these people get deported off to El Salvador, and what happens when all this is found to be unconstitutional by a court here is the United States government going to go to El Salvador and say, we want those people back? And is the El Salvadorian government going to say, well, we don't want to give those people back anymore. We've already agreed that you're going to pay us this money. You've already paid us this money. We're going to keep them here. And we're not going to return any money that you gave us for jailing these people. I think it's a couple $1 million per person that the U.S. government paid to jail them. So we don't even know if we're going to be able to get these people back. So you can just be grabbed up, put in jail for life, work in a concentration camp, work labor camp in El Salvador for the rest of your life, and the government is just, there's no accountability here. It's a huge problem. And the final clip that I want to show here is just how the Trump team is going about this. So the Trump team is supposed to, at the lower court, ask for a stay, ask for the temporary restraining order to be put down, to throw that temporary restraining order away, and then the judge in that court, Judge Boasberg, is supposed to say, I'm going to deny that, and then they can go to the appeals court. And, for everything that they're doing here, they're trying to skirt the rules, right? They don't want to do the things that they're supposed to be doing, and they're just trying to do things as quickly as possible so that it's just chaos in the courts and things fall through the cracks. Let's watch here them get absolutely eviscerated for not following procedure.
Merits of which would be considered. That was presented there. We certainly believe that it wasn't.
I don't understand how that means you didn't have time that afternoon, or Sunday, or Monday, or Tuesday, or Wednesday, or Thursday, or Friday, or Saturday, or Sunday, or this morning. Ask first.
I love it. Just, spell out how ridiculous it is. Give them all the days of the week that they were able to file this at the lower court, and they chose not to.
Stay from the district court. You've had time, correct?
Your Honor,
We had time, yes or no?
We've had time. It's clear that we went to this court. Your Honor, certainly too, this is not, I believe, an issue, the FRAP 8 compliance that plaintiffs have raised. So it's by itself may have been forfeited because that is not an argument that I believe that plaintiffs have raised. But before that, we had already sought a first stay.
You admitted it right in your filings with us. You teed it up. They didn't have to raise it. You teed it up in your filings that we didn't do this. Do you know how often the government has asked this court to dismiss stay applications because someone didn't first ask it before?
Your Honor, I acknowledge that is a common course in cases. There is nothing remotely ordinary about this case, and certainly not.
What is very ordinary is that you had plenty of time to ask for a stay.
Exactly.
And
I don't.
You only didn't, but you had the time to type into your briefs here. We didn't ask the district court for a stay.
Yeah.
Your Honor, because we thought, frankly, candidly, we hope this court might act more quickly, and we therefore wanted to get relief as soon as possible, given the stakes of the issues presented.
I guess I would have thought with the stakes that you would want to cross your procedural T's and dot the I's.
Your Honor, given the extraordinary importance of this case and the fact that it's presented.
Case exception to, it seems to me all the more reason to ask the district court for a stay if it's important. Is the government now of the view that we should adopt as a ruling in this court that when it's extraordinarily important, but there's still plenty of time, you don't have to ask a stay from the district court first or from an agency first?
Your Honor, we disagree that there was plenty of time, and we went to this court.
More than a week.
List the days out again. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Your Honor,
One sentence.
Your Honor, to the extent that this court believes that exhaustion is important, we're happy to do so before the district court. We expect that we would get an almost instantaneous denial. If that's something that is holding up relief in this case, that's something we're happy to do.
And there we have it. let me switch back here. There we have it. Just how this case, there's joy in my voice just because I know the ruling that the court eventually would put down here. And that is that they're going to keep the temporary restraining order and they're not going to side with the Donald Trump side on this appeal. So the restraining order is still in place and people aren't being able to be deported just based on whether or not the government says that they're part of Tren de Agua, that they need to prove that in a court of law. There's still so much to be done to make sure that people are getting their due process. But this is a step in the right direction. Judge Patricia Millett gets all the praises from me. She's doing an amazing job. And yeah, that's pretty much it here. I hope you guys like this video. Give it a like, give it a comment, tell me what you thought below, and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for more. Thank you for watching.